Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you for inviting me to speak about a piece of work that for us is very important, which is our systemic design framework. I will do this presentation in two parts, I think. The first part will be an explanation of the Design Council and what the Design Council is. And the second part will be a deep dive into this systemic design framework paper that was published now 2 years ago. So my name is Alexandra Deschamps-Sonsino. I am the Chief Design Officer at the Design Council. We're based in London. We are one of the first nonprofits that is governmentally supported, that was created in 1944, so after the Second World War. What is our mission? Our mission is to champion design, and to champion design as a profession, as a method, and as an industry in the United Kingdom, and to support partners internationally. We champion design in different ways and have done different kinds of championing through the years. We started with Britain Can Make It, which was an exhibition in 1946 to show what design could bring the recovery efforts of the United Kingdom after the Second World War. We then published a magazine called Design, and Design magazine was published every month between 1944 and 1999. This was an important publication to show what design was like as a profession, show its impact on manufacturing, and show its power in the economy in the United Kingdom. More recently, we have organized exhibitions like the Millennium Products exhibition. This was done for the new millennium in 1999 and showed 1,000 products that were very important at the time. And the Prime Minister of the time, Tony Blair, presented and opened the exhibition. We have also been an organization that has supported good design, or different definitions of good design. The Prince Philip Designers Prize is a prize that we managed for Prince Philip for a number of years until 2011. The Brompton bike, which is a foldable bike that some of you might be familiar with, was such a prize and won that prize in 2009. In the middle of this slide, you will see the swing tag. The swing tag was a label on products that showed that this product was better made because design was integrated or had been used. This was applied on thousands of products in the UK market, and those products were sold in the millions. More recently, we had a product incubator. This incubator helped 150 designers develop their product to the next level. And sometimes that product became very commercially successful. So the example here is Tickle Flex. Tickle Flex is for people who use syringes because they have diabetes and they have to inject themselves every few hours to manage their diabetes. And this product relaxes the skin around where the injection will happen. So very much an idea of good design that is about design helping people in a positive way. We have also worked with clients for many, many decades. We work with organizations that tend to be very large-scale organizations, sometimes national bodies, or national companies or national owned companies. In this example here, this was done for the hospital emergency rooms. The level of violence in the emergency rooms was high because the families of someone who was sick would get very anxious and would be verbally violent towards staff. We helped come into a few different hospitals in the UK to test new signage on the walls that would explain to someone what would happen to their loved one when that person came into an emergency room. The presentation of this information allowed people to relax, understand what the process was, and reduce violence in that context. And the violence was reduced by 80% because of this signage. The last thing that we do that I think brings us to the second part of my lecture is our methods and tools. We have been publishing methods and tools for many years now, starting with the Double Diamond in 2004. We will be celebrating 20 years of the Double Diamond this year with a special event in May. But this Double Diamond was very popular in explaining to non-designers what the design activity is about. In 2021, we published our systemic design framework, which I will speak about. And last year, our design value framework, which was published, and we will be building more work on next year. So if you follow us on social media, you will find more information about the design value framework. This is part of our research agenda. A lot of different elements also are part of our research work, but the systemic design framework was very much a response to the pandemic and climate change. This is also supported by our mission, which is a new mission for us. So not just to champion design, but to champion design that addresses climate change. So since 2021, we try to focus our activities of research, our activities with our clients, and our activities of promoting design to make sure that we talk about design and climate change. We have a festival once a year, and the next edition will be at the end of this year and hosted by the University of East Anglia, which is in the middle of England towards the north and the eastern part of England. So it's not in London, it's on the outskirts. All of our festivals are outside of London, but we have monthly meetups in London, which you can also join remotely because we have them on Zoom. So this is now the second part of my presentation where I will talk about our approach to systemic design. I want to start by saying that this approach is not the only approach around systemic design. There are many organizations now working around these topics. So this is our approach. Please do look at other examples, and I might mention a few at the end of the presentation. For us, we start with a simple explanation of what a system is. And I will not make you read the slide in English, but our system for us can be a natural system, a social system, a technical system, or a complex set of cause and effect. This is how we treat when we use the word systemic and system. This is what we have to think about. And I think most design will take some elements, but not all of these elements. And our challenge with climate change is to try to bring together all of these elements. So our systemic design approach is a paper that you can read, that you can download on our website. And I will talk about how we developed it. We worked with a number of different designers and designers who had a number of different experiences around climate change. These designers come from different backgrounds. Sometimes they are architects, sometimes product designers, sometimes service designers. In the UK, our design ecology is very rich. We have a lot of different kinds of design to pull from and to draw inspiration from. We looked at the existing tools and existing frameworks in 2021. This is very important for you to consider because in 2023, today, there are many more. So what we published was inspired and based on what we could find then, but things have progressed since. There is a big conference which is called RSD, and RSD is a systemic design conference that you can attend remotely and shows you the latest research and the latest academic findings. We were trying to simplify and communicate the basics of that world and that expertise to a different audience, an audience of non-designers potentially, an audience of designers who are not in academia, and an audience of designers who are maybe at the beginning of their journey of thinking systemically. So this research allowed us to create an understanding of what was there and build from it at the time. We also had been working for many years on a project called Design in the Public Sector. This was a project with many different local authorities. In Japan, you would call them prefectures. And we worked with politicians who were working at a local level. We would work with local designers, and we would bring those designers and those local authorities together to come up with different solutions, maybe prototype those solutions, and sometimes grow those solutions into businesses or services that the city would build. We had been doing this for almost 10 years when we started our systemic design research. So we had this inspiration at the back of our minds, and these lessons we were able to take into the project. So we did not start from nothing. We started from years of experience of thinking more, maybe not systemically, but more in more complex ways about the impact of design. We also started from the position of asking designers what they found challenging in thinking about climate change. So some of their answers were things like the language around climate change and net zero is too complicated. Working with others is complex and sometimes competitive. Working on a project can be too superficial. There's not enough time, the deadlines are aggressive, there's no budget. There's arbitrary divisions of who does what, when. And the focus on the bottom line, which is the financial impact, is too limited. all of these challenges we captured as part of interviews with designers. And they allowed us to understand where the potential was, because we could understand what the challenges were. So our systemic design framework paper illustrates 3 things, and I will talk about each one at a time. First, 4 characteristics, 6 principles, and an expanded double diamond process. The 4 characteristics, I think, is important to say that these are not individual characteristics for one person. These are characteristics we think a team working in a systemic way needs, but could come from one person, or could come from different people, or 2 characteristics could be in one person. It's a way of thinking about what needs to be present, but it's not dictating that there needs to be 4 people. It's saying that there are 4 characteristics that need to be in the project somehow. The first one is a system thinker. This system thinker is someone who has the ability to see the connections between things and to zoom to the micro level and the detail of a project and the macro level and the bigger dynamics. This can be someone who, for example, like Dr. Adebole, would work on a piece of rewilding and a piece of flood management, but who would understand that the design itself is one aspect, the community is more important. And so the community in Salford Wetlands, which is the project here, was very much involved from day one. They, and Dr. Adebole and her team, worked on understanding the community dynamics around this area, to understand that people like to walk their dogs along the river, and that any project that was going to, in a way, disrupt this area was going to have a negative impact on the community life. And so community life was built into the project so that this could remain an area that the community could use and could still walk their dog. So this is the ability for the designer to see the bigger picture as well as worry about the detail. Another characteristic is someone who is a leader and a storyteller. The leader part is someone who has the patience and the strength to keep going on a project and to keep being an advocate for a project, and keeps the spirits high because of the storytelling, being able to constantly talk to others on a project about why this is still an important project, why this project needs to happen, and what makes this project hopeful. This might be, for example, like the small studio in the UK called Liminal. Their work with Exeter, which is a city in the United Kingdom, they worked to illustrate what a better city could look like. That illustration was not just in workshops with post-its in an abstract way, but became an illustration, and that illustration acts as a very hopeful view of that city life and what that city life could look like. It's hopeful because of the style of illustration. It's hopeful because of the colors. It's hopeful because of the visual language that was used. all of these things are designed as part of telling a story. Then there is the designer and maker. This is more about a designer approach and knowledge and technical know-how that would allow a project to become successful because the technical detail is known. And so there is, yes, great imagination, but also to understand how things are technically possible. In this case, again, a small studio in the UK called Snook, they worked with a fishing community to understand how to place sensors onto the fishing nets so that the right kind of fish or sea life would be caught and the wrong kind would be freed. They worked very closely to understand that some of the technology and some of the sensors in the net had to be designed in particular ways that would fit the fishermen's approach and how they dealt with nets. So the attention to detail, the technical knowledge, and the curiosity and the care of that designer makes the project successful. The last characteristics is the connector and convener. This is about the designer as a host of good experiences. I know this is very important to Japanese culture, but knowing how to host and how to convene the right kinds of people, to get people to agree, to create partnerships, to create understanding and shared goals is not something that is part of everyone's culture in a natural way. And the designer is perfectly placed to have and bring this approach. For example, here, Fashion Revolution is a movement that was created to communicate who was behind some of the fashion items that people wear. And this is about being able to pull from different sources and get people together to work collaboratively to have a public conversation about an issue. This is, of course, this example is very political, it is very economic, and it is very much about supply chain, human happiness, and also wealth in organizations and how they are built. But the designer is the perfect actor in this play around a project to say, I'm going to bring all of this together because we can make change happen. I don't have a lot of time left, and so I will talk very briefly about the two different parts that are left here. But I think this 4 characteristics is the most important to think about, and I think our most powerful contribution to systemic approaches. The 6 principles, I think, are very natural to the way in which designers work in general, but it is about a different context. So being circular and regenerative, being people and planet centered, inclusive and welcoming of differences, again, zooming in, zooming out, collaborating, connecting, testing and growing are all principles that come naturally with the 4 characteristics I talked about. None of this is a big surprise, I think. This is all, in a way, very simple consequence of taking those 4 characteristics. And the way in which we frame this activity, and again, this is all in the paper that is published online, is our expanded process. So our double diamond, which is about divergence and convergence, is really about continuing to go back to the brief, to that initial starting point, and constantly reframe it and re-question it, so that you're always sure that with new information, you're able to go back to the initial question and say, is this really correct? Are we really going down the correct route? Are we even asking ourselves the correct question? And then we take the characteristics that I talked about, and we layer them around this activity of exploring, reframing, creating, and catalyzing. Again, these are different ways of seeing the double diamond, but they help think about that reframing activity. Looking at our relationships with our clients, looking at their relationships with their industry, their relationships with political limits, whether that's the law or standards, for example. Leadership and storytelling. How will this project be different to what is going on elsewhere? Will it help the industry do something better for the environment? Will it help our peers and our competitors do better? And how do we continue this away from this project? How do we create other projects from this project? What are the other opportunities? And I don't think that this is about our team, our design team looking at the project now. It might be that you create opportunities for many others, but you have to be able to plan that. Again, I know that in Japanese culture, long-term thinking is quite common. For us in England, this is not common. And so trying to think beyond a project to see other opportunities is something we have to illustrate. And I will leave you and finalize this presentation with two images. One, which is, I think, how we can see the history of design from a linear process of wanting to reduce perhaps either the waste, the carbon emissions, or the impact of a project, to a more regenerative approach where we go back and ask ourselves questions constantly, and we make sure that things are reused, that they feed local economies, they feed local actors, that people are able to learn from one another, that people are able to make significant change. And to the last image of my presentation before I finish, which is to think about the next systems that we have. Our system shifting paper, which came out last year, is an example of this, where in that paper we discuss what next practice, what we call next practice, or next ways in which we practice design might look like. And this is about, as we do this systemic work, to move the systemic work so that it influences how we even see systems. Because if everyone starts to work in more systemic way, we might see our connections with each other as practitioners, with each other as clients and designers, and with the economy locally, global economy, and our political systems differently. And we start to see our impact as designers differently. We are no longer just engaging on a short period of time, but we might be engaging over long periods of time. In the United Kingdom, this has led to people creating design departments in the government, because the design activity is now no longer something you do one project at a time for one client at a time, but something that you might do for your whole career in different ways, because you're embedded in a system that you are slowly shifting because of your role as a designer. So thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak to you about our work. Again, I invite you to go to our website and to look at these different tools and frameworks that we have published. I have mostly focused on the one in the middle, but the other ones are also worth exploring. And thank you again.